Okay, we're going to make our star points, which are actually flying geese. And we're going to make 4 of them at the same time. So I'm going to show you the no waste method. There's lots of ways to do flying geese. This is a really simple and accurate way. You also notice I mentioned that I'm going to show you about leaders and enders. I have one in there. When I'm sewing, I always stop with the needle in the down position because it just is going to pick up the fabric. So what I do, I'm just going to do something, putting 2.5-inch squares together. There'll always be a blue and a red. They just move off to the right side of my machine. So the key to this is we want to keep our point, and we need to have 1/4 of an inch from the tips. So then when we put these blocks together or to the next unit, we'll have the accuracy. Now, if you remember, I'm making 2 tops. So here's one where I have fussy cut the center, and then my star points are going to come from this. Now, I'm not using this anyplace else in the quilt for the inside, for the table runner. So I wanted to show you what that's looking like. I was a little concerned about the dark background, but I'm really happy. So using your pattern, you're going to get the points, the pieces for the flying geese units. You're going to get the big background square, and then you're going to start with 2 of the small accent 2 fabrics. You're going to draw a diagonal line. Now, I've used like a chalk line that is white, and it's going to show up on here. A lot of people like to use a friction pen. The problem with this is if you're going to press it or it's going to be hot, this is going to go away and you're going to lose your line. So you want to be careful with that. You can simply use a regular mechanical pencil as well. I try to stay away from ink if possible. It sometimes just runs in. So following the diagram in the pattern, you are going to line up your block so that you have this diagonal line is going to run continuously. Now, some people like to put these on here and then draw the diagonal line. I prefer not to do that. I think that sometimes it's going to distort it or stretch it. Now, you could put a pin in here. You could just leave it, which is what I'm going to do because, it's just easier right now. You could also put just a dot of your seam-aligned glue in here to hold it into place. And if you do this, you put the seam line in here, you have to remember, you have to press it. Just a tiny little dot just to hold this square in place. What we're going to do is we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch from both sides. Now we're going to use our stiletto again to help us to make sure that we get perfect 1/4 inch all the way through. All right, so we're going to simply line this up. Remember, my needle is in the down position. And see if I sew this way, see how this flip is up, or that flap is up? You run the risk of it catching. So you're actually going to want to turn your first seam. You want to have the tip going down. So I'm simply going to sew 1/4 of an inch. I'm making sure that's lining up. You're going to sew all the way down. Now, if you're making the small or the large, it doesn't matter. You're making 2 of these blocks. So you would just be chain piecing all of this. I'm not going to do that, so I'm getting my chain ready, or my leader and ender ready. And I'm just going to sew this. So I'm ready for the next one. Now you're going to take this, whoops. And now you're going to sew on the other side. Now, it doesn't bother me to sew watching 1/4 of an inch here. Some people really always like to watch it over there. You could have started like this and then moved over. It doesn't really matter. Whichever is accurate or most comfortable for you to sew. You want to make sure that this doesn't get pushed over. Go ahead and sew that all the way through. I'm getting my chain piece ready to leader and ender. And by the time I'm done with this table runner, or these table runners, I'm going to have a lot of those 2.5-inch pieces sewn together. So what I have now is I have this unit that is sewn on a 1/4 of an inch for both pieces. Now you'll notice I'm using a lighter thread so that you can see this. What you're going to do now is you are going to cut right down on that drawn line. And what you're going to get are 2 pieces that look like that. So once you do this, you're going to be opening these up and pressing these units out toward the little triangles. Now with these small pieces, sometimes the pressing, you really have to be careful that you don't distort it. And it sometimes takes a little bit of extra pressure to make sure that it stays flat. So using your easy press makes this super easy. Just do your line across here. Again, you could do it on the back if you want, and press it out. And that, see how flat that lays? That's perfect. So now what we are going to do is we're going to take another one of your squares that you drew your diagonal line and going to place it in the corner. Now again, this is a perfect place to put a little dot of your seam-aligned glue in here and just hold it into place. You're going to do that to both of these units. All right. So this one, I'm actually going to chain piece both of these. I'm going to show you that. All right. So you're going to come down a 1/4 of an inch on both sides. Now, I prefer to come this direction. Because this seam allowance is pressed this way, it just is more natural for the seam to go properly. If you are sewing an accurate 1/4 of an inch down here, when you get to this point, that should be a 1/4 of an inch from the seam line. So that little valley there, or that little dip there, should be the perfect 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to hold my tongue just right and hope that that works. Notice where I'm putting this stiletto to hold it into place. And look, that was really good there. So now I'm going to bring and do this other one. Perfect, right on there again. Keep your foot or your needle in the down position. That makes it really nice. Now we have to sew this direction, but it's already secured. So again, you're going to be starting right at this point, which should be the 1/4, almost exactly the 1/4 of an inch from your other, the drawn line. So I'm going to do this one. Now what's going to happen, this is going to be opened, and we have 2 flying geese once we cut here. So I have one that's cut. It's going to look like this. All right, so you're going to get 2 of these. That comes out of here. I pressed this one. Let me show you this. You can finger press, but be careful. It's a triangle, so it's on the bias. It's going to look like this. I did use this easy press to get that perfectly flat. Now you're thinking, okay, these are pretty ugly. I'm going to show you how to trim this so it is exactly the size that we need. And it all has to do, for accuracy, is the way that we start with this piece. So you're going to see here, I'm ready to pull that other one out. I'm going to get my next 2 squares together, line those up, and there we go. I'm ready for my flying geese. If you're doing the short version, you need to do 2 sets of this. If you are doing the long, you're going to be making 3 star blocks, so you'll need to be making 4 of the 3 of the no waste flying geese. All right. Okay, so we have 4 flying geese made from the no waste method, and we need to clean them up. We need to get rid of these little tips or dog ears, whatever you want to call them, and we need to make sure that they are the correct size. So the biggest key to success here with this, I think, is the orientation of starting to trim. If you remember with the half square triangles, I told you using the 45-degree angle is extremely helpful in making sure you have things lined up on our half square triangles. Remember, we wanted to make sure everything was lined up. So we need to do the same thing here. We've got a seam line, and we know it's a 45-degree angle. So when we try to trim this, whoops, we know what this size has to be. It has to be 2 inches by 3.5. I have no reference point here other than these ends. Nothing to tell me if my seam is right. But when you flip it, I'm going to move these out of the way. When you flip it this way, our 45-degree angle is right there on the seam. So what I'm looking for here, first thing, is my 45-degree angle on that seam. I'm also looking to make sure that the point here is 1/4 inch. I then need to make sure that I'm 2 inches in height and at least a 3.5 in width. Now what you want to do is, I'm going to try to show you, if you line up everything, the point here at the 3.5 should be exactly at an intersection of those two fabrics. Let's see if I have one that maybe isn't quite on to help you figure out how to adjust. Wouldn't that be funny if I tried to make a mistake and it didn't happen, and when I try not to, yep, I think it's going to be each way. It doesn't matter. So here's what I do. Find my 45-degree angle, find the 1/4 inch, make sure that that's fine, because that's going to be our point for when we sew them together. I'm 2 here, 3.5 here. I'm going to take my rotary cutter, cut across here, the side, the right side, and then across the top. Now, when I rotate this, flip it this direction, I don't have a 45-degree angle seam here. Instead, I know this is supposed to be 2 by 3.5. This is what I line up now. I'm looking to make sure that I'm extended all the way over to the 3.5 and all the way high of the 2. And that my point, my 1/4 inch point, is good from here to there. Now, if there's some that it doesn't match up perfect, you realize here that this extends. So if this is a hair longer than this, in other words, if I'm short here, when I go to pin it, I left the long part for a reason. So I know that I have to adjust and pin according to the long part. Now let's see if you can see this. See, this is just a hair longer here. So when I go to pin, I'm going to be checking or gluing, making sure that that's accurate. That's where I don't use the low part. That's going to be off a little bit. So if you're left-handed, you're going to be working in the opposite direction. You're going to find your 45. We're going to see if we can do that. This one a little bit better than I did on the last one. Okay, here's my 45. I'm 2 high, 3.5. I'm going to cut to the left. See, when I'm not strong that way, and then across here. All right, then I'm going to rotate, and I know 3.5 is exactly where I need to be here, and 2, lining up, across the left, and then across the top. Oops, didn't close that because it didn't cut. That's what I get for trying to show you left-handed. Okay, so that's good. So that's with a square. If you have a rectangle, you're doing the exact same thing. Exact same thing. You're going to put your flying geese this way, making sure that you've got the angle You're going to find your 45 degrees. Okay, and your 2 and your 3.5, 2 this way, 3.5 this way, the 45-degree angle, and you're going to trim right side, then across the top, rotate it around, find your 3.5 by 2, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Checking your 1/4 inch, and there we go. So very quickly and easily, we can go from something that looks like this, pretty ragged, to nice, clean points here that are going to be put together with a square that is the same fabric here in this pattern. It doesn't have to be, but that works out really nicely here. So that, you'll be surprised, that is, for me, the easiest way to get accurate flying geese with the 1/4 inch points. All right, good luck.